In this video, we're going to look at the topic of functions. Our goals are going to be to understand how functions facilitate abstraction in code and to look at some example methods in the Python library and learn how to call them. We'll also be learning some important vocabulary like the terms argument and return value. Those will be important for us to understand as we use functions. The goal in this particular video series is to learn about using functions or calling functions that are already provided for us, either in the standard library or as code that's written by somebody else. In future lectures, we'll learn about how to write our own functions. So first, let's talk about what a function is. A function is a sequence of programming instructions that are bundled or grouped together so that somebody who wants to execute those sequence of instructions simply has to call the function by name rather than retyping those instructions in their own program. So the idea is that somebody else has created a tool, something that we can use, and we don't have to like recreate the tool from scratch. Instead, we're just able to use the tool to kind of augment or help us out when we're trying to solve problems using Python. And Python has lots of useful functions that are grouped together or collected over time, and those groups of functions are called libraries. And you probably remember that Python has a standard library of functions, and we've been using those all semester. Anytime that we've been writing programs, we've made at least one function call. We've used at least one tool that somebody else provided for us. So we're going to be looking at some examples of Python functions that are in the standard library. And as we look at these example functions, we're going to take particular note about what information do we have to pass into the function in order to carry out its algorithm. And we're going to call that information that comes into the function the arguments for the function. It just means information that the function requires in order for it to carry out its instructions. We're also going to take particular note of information that comes back from the functions, and we call that information the return value. That can be information that the function calculates. If it creates some kind of numerical information as part of its algorithm, it can return that as the return value, or it might have some other kind of response, maybe like a true or false value based on a condition, something like that that happens during its algorithm. Any information that it wants to communicate back to our program, we call the return value. And anytime that a function has a return value, we have to remember to capture the return value by storing it in a variable or putting it in a print statement or something like that where it gets used in our program. If we forget that step, then Python just doesn't remember the return value. And so as we look at the example methods or functions in Python, we're going to take particular notes of those two items. What information do we need to provide? That's the arguments. And what information will the function provide to us? That's the return value.